Hi Stampers! I had some people asking me how I did this watercolor technique using the Country Birdhouse stamp set. Let me zoom out just a little bit there. There we go. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quick, and hopefully it'll turn out as well as this one did. All right, let's see how this goes. So I'm still new to Stampin' Up, and I don't have all their ink colors yet. So I was trying to duplicate what I saw somebody else do with the watercoloring of this stamp set. And I have this fade out no line coloring ink. I've had it for years, found it in my stash. So that's what I used to stamp this image. I think you could probably do either saddle brown stays on, or if you did beige or crumb cake, one of those two would be okay. But let's get started. And I'm going to show you how light this is. It's actually really nice for no line coloring. This would work good if you wanted to use watercolor pencils as well. But I'm going to use Stampin' Up inks for the most part, the colors that I had anyway. Unfortunately, I don't have any browns. That was my one thing that I wish I had for this project. Okay, so I'm just going to push that. I am using the Stampin' Up Pierce mat as a cushion. All right, can you see that? Hopefully you can see that in there. Very, very light, but just enough that you can follow it for the watercoloring. All right, so we have the birdhouse. Now let's add the bird. I might do new colors for this one. Let's change this one up a little bit. I'm going to put the bird over here this time. So I've got my bird here. And then I have this small flower stamp. And I'm just going to add those here and there. Okay, so I've got 6 flowers. Let's do an odd number. There we go. Okay, so all my images are on here. I'm done with the stamping part of this. So now let's move on to the coloring. So I'm starting out with the birdhouse, and I'm using water brushes. I'm actually going to use this finer tipped water brush. You want to start out by coloring the area that you're going to paint first with the water. So I'm working in small sections. I'm not getting the entire piece of paper wet. This is watercolor paper. So I'm going to start over here. Let me squeeze some water out of there. And I'm just going to get everything wet for where I'm coloring right now. Okay, and it's, I don't know, this ink kind of repels the color that I put down, which I found was interesting yesterday when I was doing this. Okay, so I'm not getting those scallops wet yet because I want those to stay white. And I'm going around the bird's tail here. And I'm just kind of brushing in where I want to start. So I'm only going to get this much wet for right now. So I just have that small little section. So now I'm going to take a brown ink, and hopefully you can see this. I have a glass mat. I'm literally just putting some ink on the glass mat. And then I'm going to add water with the water brush and swirl that around, and that'll give me lights and darks. So I'm using the same color for the whole birdhouse, but I'll go in with less water for the areas that I want to be darker. So I'm just going to come in and start painting that on here. And again, I'm only doing it in the areas that I got wet. Add a little more. Sorry, I need to turn it so I can see where I am here. Again, you know, that ink color that I used to stamp the images is so light that you really I kind of put the stamp set in the same area so that I could kind of use it as a visual. So I'll have it over here, and that way I can kind of refer to it. So I can see what I need to avoid going around. Like with these scallops especially, it's harder to see. And then you also have the hole where the bird goes in. That's also hard to see. Okay, so I have that much done. Now I'm going to come in while it's still wet, and I'm getting a little bit of a darker color to kind of go on the edges and under those scallops, just to add some highlighting. Okay, go around this scallop. Just kind of makes that scallop stand out more, which is nice. And if you get ink where you don't want it, get it wet and you can kind of wipe it away. So this scallop is looking a little funny to me. So I think I didn't get the whole thing, is what the problem is. Okay, there we go. That's looking better. Okay, so now while that's drying, I'm going to work in another spot. So let me take a bigger water brush. I'm going to get this side wet now. So I'm going to move around. Let me get this one started. Ooh, that one decided it wants to leak. Okay, and I'm going to kind of come around the other side of that opening for the bird. And again, I'm trying to avoid. All right, so I'm going to go back in with my finer one for the scallop area. Oop. You do want to have either a paper towel or a cloth nearby that you can wipe your colors off on. Fortunately, I am going to go in with that same color, so that's not going to affect the final product. Okay, and again, we got to avoid this bird's tail. So I'm kind of coming around here because we do want him to stand out. Trying to see what his body looks like. That looks about right. All right, and again, we got to get a little more around these scallops, I don't have that quite wet yet. This is totally not my idea. I watched another video from another demonstrator and just loved it so much, which is why I bought this set. Okay, I'm having a hard time seeing the scallops on this one. Okay, I think that's about it. All right, so now we have this side wet. So again, I'm going to go in and I'm kind of fading this out a little bit more. I don't want it to be as dark on this side. So that'll just give us a little kind of a watercolor wash look. And then you can see like the different shadows and stuff that are on the birdhouse. Okay, might add a little bit more color here. So as you can see, it's, you know, it's when it's drying, it fades back quite a bit. So keep that in mind when you're coloring. You might need to go back in after it dries and add a little more color. I believe that's what I ended up doing on the other one, especially on the flowers. The flower centers especially faded a lot. And so I was needing to go back in and add more color there. Okay. And it's not going to be perfect because that's how watercolor works. It takes a lot to kind of give up that absolute control, I think, when you're watercoloring, which is why I was afraid to start doing this in the first place. But, you know, it's just paper. So keep that in mind. And all right, so this has a lot of water on it right here, so I'm gonna kind of take some of that off and add more color. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry a little bit because it is pretty wet up here. I'm actually going to clean my brush and then come in with just water and try to get rid of some of that brown that ended up in my scallop that I didn't want. So see how that just took that away? It's pretty forgiving, actually. And I do like that about this. Okay. So again, this is looking really wet here. Now, see how it took a lot of the color away when I did that? So I am trying to let it dry on its own, but maybe go in with a drier brush. Oh, I think I covered some of my bird's tail too. Okay. I'm going to add a little more of the dark in here. Browns are kind of funny because they have either a gray undertone or a green undertone. And so it's kind of hard to figure out which one you like there. All right, I'm going to lighten that a little bit now. So I went over it because it was looking, and it still does, it looks kind of green to me. Do you see that green tint in there? But hopefully once it dries, it won't have that, because I did not have that on this one. So we'll figure that out as we go. Okay, so I'm going to let those areas dry. Let's work on the roof. So the roof, I used a gray. And I wanted a lighter gray, and all I have is Pebbled Path right now, so I am using a Distress ink that I had. Oops. And I'm going to use that for the roof and this piece across here that the bird's sitting on. All right, so let's get those areas wet. I'll start down here so you can see it better. Don't forget to clean your brush in between. You forget that with a paintbrush when you're not used to using one, and you know, when you're using the blends, you're just going over it, so it's kind of hard for me to remember to keep doing that. I don't paint very often, so okay. And I am getting this whole piece wet because it's a smaller area to work in. All right, so now we're going to work in this small area here. I'm going to add, again, I'm adding water to my ink over here. And I just kind of keep pushing it out to the side to get it lighter and lighter. Because you want to start out light. You can always add more ink. And And actually with watercolor you can take away too, but you know, if you don't have to, you might as well just lighten it up to start with. Then you can add your shadows and those could be darker. Okay, and I'm just filling this whole thing in with that lighter color. And then I'm going to go a little darker up here. And I'm not adding water. I'm just kind of going into that darker area. And I'm going underneath here just to kind of create that shadow. Okay, so we have that. And then I'm doing the edge, and I'm going to come in on that edge. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I love coloring. What's your favorite coloring medium? Do you like markers, colored pencils, watercolor pencils? What's your favorite? All right, so you can see I kind of screwed up the line here. So I'm going to clean my brush off, and I'm going to come in here with just water. Kind of erase it. Okay, again, we need a wet brush. So that helps you get kind of a crisper line going. All right, so see how I fixed that? All right, let's go back to this because this is bothering me. Well, actually, let's do the roof first since I have the gray on here already. All right, so now I'm gonna work on the top of the roof here. So again, I'm getting it wet. I do like how when you're wetting this and working in smaller sections, it kind of contains your paint, which is nice. Okay, so now let's do the same thing. We're going to make it light, and then we'll add our highlights. Sorry if I keep turning it on you, and I know I'm working upside down right now, but it is very hard to see those lines with that light ink pad I used. And I have a camera in the way at the moment, so I can't get as close as I was when I did the original. Okay. All right, I think I have it. Can always do touch-ups when we do the darker pieces. All right, so now I'm going to go back into that darker color again. I'm just going to kind of come up from the bottom. Same with this side. And then I'm going to do close to that edge here. Just get some different color in there to give it a sharper outline. Okay. And I'm going to get a little bit lighter in here. Again, I'm going to add more water to take some away. That'll give you some of your shading. And I do see that I got a little bit out of the lines here, so again, I'm going to come in with some clean water and just kind of clean up that edge. Okay. And then I'm going to make that a little sharper. All right, so I think I still need to clean that up a little. All right, so there's our roof. Let's work on this, because this, I don't like that line that's on there. So I'm just wiping away my coloring there. I'm going to go back in with some browns. Again, I think like crumb cake, is it pecan pie? Any of those would be nice for this too. They're on my shopping list. I just haven't gotten them yet. All right, so I'm going to add a little more color in here. I kind of like that color better. What do you think? Doesn't look so, I almost see pink and green in here, which is kind of not good for our birdhouse. So let's see if we can get that looking a little better. Oh, that's much better. Okay. So I'm seeing that my scallops are not looking so good up here. I got to clean that up a little bit, but let's get this color on first. All right. So I did go over the little perch that's under here, and that's okay because we're going to go over that with a darker color anyway. Okay, so I just need to get rid of this line. I don't like that line. So I'm going to add some water without picking up any more color and see if we can smooth that out a little. Just so we can blend it a little better. A little more water. So I'm kind of trying to erase that line by just using water. But again, it is adding in more of that pink is coming through. So I'm going to try to just make it darker all in this area. And let's see if that does what we're wanting. Add a little water. We can just kind of sweep that in there. There, that's better. That makes me happier. All right, let's clean up this scallop area. But while I still have the brown, I added a post because I felt like this was looking like it was just kind of floating in the air. Okay, so I'm just adding a post here. Nothing fancy. There we go. So we have our post. And I don't know if I mentioned this. This is 4 by 5 1/4 watercolor paper. Okay, so let's do, we'll clean up over here. We're done with our brown. So now let's go into, these scallops first of all. So I can really see it now that it's starting to dry back a little. I can see where I went over. And so I'm just going to use my wet brush to try to erase that. Okay. And actually we're coloring that scallop a color, so that'll cover it. All right, let's move into this tiny area here. We're going to do that in the blue, and I used Misty Moonlight for that. So again, I'm just smushing a little bit You don't need a ton of that one. So can you see that little spot that I did here? Add our water. Okay. And then I'm just coming up under here. We do want it to show up, so. Okay, so there's that. And this is going to help everything stand out a little more too. Helps clean up your lines too. So I am using kind of a drier brush in this area. And I don't know if you noticed, but I forgot to actually get this area wet. So that's why my color is a little darker. All right, so let's do some of these other areas. See how it looks right now? This is what, when I first started doing this, I was like, oh gosh, that does not look good. And I was a little freaked out by it, but you gotta trust the process and just keep going. All right, so we're done with that blue because we're gonna use a different blue on the bird. Let's do our scallop, and I used peach pie for that. So let's do that. Okay, and again, you don't need a whole lot. We're gonna do the bird's belly. We're gonna do the flowers, and then we're going to do the scallop, all in this peach pie. So let me get the scallops wet. We'll start there. Get it started again. Oh. And get the blue off before we end up with blue scallops. All right, so now let's get the scallops wet. And I am going to try to get the shape back in my scallops when I do this one. So I'm kind of trying to reshape them as I get it wet. And then that way the water and the color can help with that. Okay, so I have, oh, I missed one. All my scallops are wet. Okay, so now let's add a little water to that. And I'm starting out lighter, but then I will add more color as it goes. And again, adding that water really lightens up your colors. So it's not perfect, but hopefully once we add more of the darker color, it'll start looking better. Okay. We'll get all of that in. So my scallops look better on this side. It's looking kind of pathetic over here, so I got to do some fixing on that. So I'm actually going to add a little more of the peach pie to my glass mat over here. I know this is not a Stampin' Up! Glass mat, but I've had this one for years, and I love it. It's really a versatile product, so if you can get the one from Stampin' Up!, I would highly recommend it. Okay, that's looking a little better. So I'm not using a lot of water this time. I'm using more of the pure color to paint it. It's at least looking a little more even. Okay. Going right around. Okay, it looks a little better. I might take some water and kind of go up in here and see if I can. Oh, I know what we didn't do. We didn't do our dark outline here. So I will do that, but let's finish up what we're doing here first. I'm seeing more kind of a, I don't know, that looks kind of muddy right here. But I think once I do the sky and the grass, that'll take care of that. So, all right, let's do, while we have this peach pie out, let's do a little bit on the bird's belly. So I did it here, and then I went over it with boho blue. All right, so let's do that. We're gonna go right here, just a little touch. And then I'm gonna use pure color with no water to do his beak. So there's his beak. Okay, and we need to do his feet. So again, I'm not going to use any water on that. Okay, so we've got his legs. And then we need to do the flowers. So remember, we have about 7 flowers on here. And I'm going to color the whole thing kind of a washed out peach. And then I'll go back in and do the centers darker. This could be really pretty with so many different colors. You could even do each flower a different color. All right, so there's one flower. I've got 2 over here. And I know it's very hard to see that outline. And I'm sure it's not showing up on camera at all. But it's just enough that I can see it and get the right shape, which I like. Okay. So we'll get these flowers in. And see how the center's showing up darker anyway because of the ink that I stamped it with. It's kind of, I don't know if it's repelling the water or if it's absorbing it, but it's kind of making it stand out more, which will help us when we go to do the centers. Okay, so now we've got this one. And I'm just gonna keep turning it so that I can see. Okay, so we've got that one. I think we've got 3 more flowers to do. Then we can get into the bird and the other things that we need to do. So I am going to use the gray again to do the perch and the hole. All right. All right, we got 1 more flower. Hopefully I'm not making you dizzy by moving this so much. Okay. All right, so we've got our flowers. Now let's do, I'm going to add a little bit more of the peach pie because I want to do the flower centers and I want those to be a lot brighter. So I'm really not going to add any water to that. So I'll just pick up whatever water I have over here, but I really want this to be a lot darker. So I'm just going in there and I'm tapping it. Kind of making a star shape or little dots. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a circle. But the little dots at least give it some depth. And then we'll see how those look when they dry. Okay. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but when I did the flowers in these smaller areas, I did not get those wet first. I just used the wet ink from my palette over here. Okay, so let's see what else we need to do. I think we need to add a little shadowing to this side of the post too. And I got my post a little wide on this one, but that's okay. All right, so let me clean my brush. And then I think we'll work on the bird. Okay, clean up my area over here. All right, so now we're going to use boho blue, and we're going to do our bird. So again, we don't need a ton on this one because the bird's not that big. I am going to wet the bird though, so let me get my water started because we do want this to flow. So areas where you want the water color, the coloring, to kind of flow into other areas, you want to get wet. If you want it to pretty much stay where you put it, just use what you get wet on your palette. Okay, so I think I got that all wet now. So now I'm going to add some water to my blue so I can kind of get that nice and... I want it nice and light when I start, because I'm going to add darker areas with the same color. And see how I'm kind of going over that orange? I'm not going over all of it, but at least the upper part of the chest I am. Okay, so I'm getting his tail feathers. Okay, so we have a nice light wash on there. Now I'm going to come in with the darker. I didn't add water to that because my bird is wet. So I'm kind of just adding the color like that. So it's kind of flowing into the other areas. Okay, and then I'm going to do that here too. And that way, he still has some light areas, and he's got some dark areas. Okay, so that's all we're going to do on the bird. We do need to add his eye back in. So I will do that. All right, so we're done. Actually, you know what? While we have the boho blue out, I am going to use this for the sky as well. So let me add a little more. I try to work with the same colors, you know, as I'm going so that I don't have 4 or 5 different colors on my palette at the same time, although I have done that too. But you're just going to kind of come in here and, oh, let's get our background wet first. So I am going to add some water. I already had that blue on my brush, and that's okay because that's what I want. I'm just kind of scribbling it on there, which gives you that nice rough edge to look more watercolory. You can add more color as you go. And I'm just working in small sections again. All right, so let's get this part wet. And I'm just kind of tapping it. I'm not really, like trying to get it perfect. So I'm just kind of adding that color in there to give the illusion of a sky. Get kind of close to your flowers. And we're going to go over some of this with green, so that's okay. It'll be okay. Okay. See, that kind of helped clean up my edge of my birdhouse too. I'm going to add a little more color so it's a little darker in areas. Okay, so that's about all we need for sky. So I think we're done with the blue. All right. So the only thing I didn't like is, can you see that where it kind of, the ink from the outline of the birdhouse kind of goes through the bird. So I might add just some straight blue in here to make that area a little darker so that you don't notice that as much. I don't know about you, but that bugs me a little bit. So let's do that. Just to kind of mask it a little bit. Don't know if it's going to work, but we'll try. Okay. Get his tail feathers a little better there. Okay. All right. So let me clean that part up. Let's work on, since this is dry now, let's start working on the hole. So that we're going to go back to the gray that we used earlier. And I'm going to do just a little bit of black. Okay, we do need to do a little bit of black for the bird's eye. Look how much he comes to life when you add his eyeball back in. So that helps a lot. All right, now let's go in, water down our gray, and we're going to come in here. So this is kind of a brown gray, which is why it works so well with the other brown that I had. Okay, so I've got the whole thing colored in there. I am going to go here more with pure color than the watered down part. And I didn't get that area wet at all. I'm just kind of going in with the ink for that perch. Okay, so now I'm going to take some of the darker and I'm going to do my shadowing on the edge. Okay, do some over here too. Okay, then I'm going to add a little black. So I'm going to clean my brush a little. And I'm just going to add a touch of black right around that edge. So it's starting to show some depth there. Might add a little black to the perch. to that side also. Okay. And then I think I'm going to take this darker gray and kind of come in here and get that side a little bit darker on our post. Okay. And then we need to do a little shadowing under here. And I think this will work, so we're going to try it. So it helps to kind of bring back our scallop line here. All right, now I think I'm gonna water it down just a little bit so it's not so harsh right here. But I do want to add a little bit on this side just so it's got a little more definition. And again, I'm gonna water it down a little bit. Okay. So it's not looking quite as messy as it did a little while ago. I don't know about you guys, but I was a little worried for a minute there. All right, let's go into our greens now. So we need to do the grassy areas and the green around the flowers. So I'm going to use Granny Apple Green and Mossy Meadow. Why did I choose those colors? Because they're the only two greens I have right now. Well, I guess I have Shy Shamrock, but these are the two that work well together, I think, for this. All right, so we're going to start with our Granny Apple Green. Again, I'm wetting it down. And I am going to wet some of my surface, just like I did before with the blue. But see how I'm just kind of coming in here? I'm not even getting real close. I don't care what my edge looks like. Just kind of adding color. I'm squeezing this water brush as I go. So it kind of lightens up and wets my surface at the same time here. So we'll get some of that in. Get it down here. I almost think the messier the better, because when it dries, it turns out pretty amazing and it's not that hard to do. So I hope you guys will give this a try, because it is a nice way to use your ink pads in a different way. All right, so we have some green going on in the background. Now I'm going to take a little bit darker Granny Apple Green, and I'm just going to kind of come in and act like I'm making almost leaves on these flowers. I'm literally just dotting it. I'm not concerned about what the shape looks like. You're just trying to give the illusion. And I'm doing it while that background is still wet, so it kind of flows. And then you get these darker and lighter areas. Let's do some up here. And I do want to add, I'm just adding like little dots in here. Oh, I got a little carried away there. but it'll dry back a little softer, so it'll be okay. Just kind of the illusion of some grass. Okay. Maybe a little more up here. All right. So now let's do the darker green. So we're going to go into that mossy meadow. Sorry if I'm shaking the camera here. All right, so now let's go into the mossy meadow. Don't need very much of that one. Oop. So this one, I just kind of tapped it on just to give some depth. And like here, it could almost look like you've either got a bush here or a pine tree. I'll add some here since I didn't have any color there. And I'm just dotting it. I'm not doing anything special here. But it does add more depth of color in your colors here. And then I'm going to kind of wash it out a little bit and just kind of give the illusion of a tree or something back here. Okay. I'm thinking we need a little more depth in here. What do you think? Gonna add a little more of this kind of green in here. And you're gonna find you're not gonna get the same thing twice. All right, I think I'm gonna add a little more depth in here. And then I think I need to do something. I got too much brown on the, or too much green on my roof. So I'm gonna get that cleaned off. All right, so I'm gonna go back to that gray again. It's just a matter of, you know, you gotta sit back and kind of look at it and see what you think it needs as it dries. But I kind of want my brown in here again. Even gonna do kind of a darker line there. I think I'll do that over here too. I kind of like that. Gives it a little more definition. Okay. So I feel like this is part of the roof, but I'm not real sure. So I'm just going to color it. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's not meant to be. And it is handmade, right? I just feel like this is starting to wash out a little bit, so I'm going to kind of come in here, kind of do this. There, that's better. This, to me, was the same color as this after it dried, so do you see what I mean by as it dries, some of the colors might need to be gone over again and add a little more color. All right, so that is my watercoloring lesson. I am not an expert at this. I never watercolor, so I just wanted to give it a try and see what I could do, and it's not too hard to do it. So I ended up mounting this one on boho blue card base, and then I used the Hello Friend from that same stamp set. Hope that helps you to try something new. Have a great day.